You want to get a solid grasp on a major policy shift, and you want it now. Well, you've landed in the right place. Today, we're taking a government's white paper, published back in May 2025. It's titled, Restoring Control Over the Immigration System.
That's CP 1326 for anyone wanting the official reference.
Right. And as the title pretty clearly suggests, this document outlines the government's strategy to, well, regain control over UK immigration.
And crucially, bring down net migration. That's the key metric, isn't it? The difference between people coming in and people leaving.
Exactly. So this white paper lands at quite a critical time, it seems.
It really does. We've seen a really significant increase in legal net migration since 2019.
Huge numbers, right?
Astonishingly high. It peaked at 906,000 in the year ending June 2023.
Wow.
And even the more recent figures for the year ending June 2024, it was still very high at 728,000.
So this paper is the response.
It's the government's detailed response, yes. It covers the whole picture net migration itself, the labor market link, skilled students, the idea of fair controls, enforcement, and integration too.
Okay, so our goal today is to really pull out the core proposals and understand the thinking behind them.
Precisely. What's proposed and why now?
Let's start right there then. Why this intense focus on reducing net migration right now? What's the government's case?
Well, the white paper is very direct about the scale of change needed. As we said, net migration essentially quadrupled between June 2019 and June 2023.
Quadrupled, that's a stark figure.
It is. And while the latest numbers show a bit of a decrease, they're still at levels we haven't really seen before in recent times.
And what's driving that increase, according to the paper?
Primarily, it points to non-EU nationals and their dependents, people coming for work, for study, and also through humanitarian routes, thinking Ukraine, Hong Kong specifically. But what's quite interesting is the government's assessment that there's been a noticeable shift towards migration for lower-skilled jobs during this period.
Lower-skilled migration, that is an interesting shift. So what kind of impact has this had, according to the white paper? What are the main pressures they've seen?
They outline several key impacts. Firstly, a major concern is increased demand on public services. Housing is mentioned specifically.
Makes sense. More people, more demand.
Exactly. Secondly, they highlight the potential for labor exploitation. The thinking is a large influx might create opportunities for, shall we say, less scrupulous employers.
Right, exploiting vulnerable workers.
And finally, the paper touches on a possible fragmentation of social relations, so the social cohesion aspect due to high levels of inward migration.
Okay, those are pretty significant concerns touching on everyday life for people in the UK.
They are, and these are the sorts of pressures the government aims to address with these proposals.
Now, the paper also talks about the economy. It points out that GDP growth has happened despite this high net migration, but there's a nuance there.
There is. They highlight that even with record net migration, the UK's GDP growth since late 2019, well, it's actually lagged behind the Eurozone and the US.
Lag behind.
And perhaps more tellingly, GDP per capita, a key measure of individual living standards, that's stagnated. It's actually fallen since 2022.
So the argument is more people doesn't automatically equal a stronger economy for everyone living here.
That seems to be the concern they're raising, yes. Is this translating into higher living standards across the board? Their analysis suggests maybe not as much as hoped.
And this feeds into the labor market points, doesn't it? The white paper talks about a distortion. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yes. They point to a correlation they've observed in several lower-skilled sectors.
Okay.
Where there's been a big jump in employment of non-EU nationals, they've seen corresponding declines in the number of UK workers in those same jobs.
Right, so a potential displacement effect.
That's the implication. They give a specific example with engineering that's quite striking.
Oh, yeah.
Between 2021 and 2024, engineering apprenticeships apparently halved. At the same time, work visas for engineering professionals doubled.
Halved while visas doubled. Wow.
It suggests, potentially, less incentive for businesses to invest in training Brits if they can recruit from overseas more easily. It highlights those potential unintended consequences.
That definitely paints a picture of a possible imbalance, and it sounds like maybe the data itself hasn't always been perfect either, making it hard to track.
The white paper actually acknowledges that. Measuring migration accurately is complex.
I bet.
Historical limitations in data collection, plus these really rapid, big shifts in migration patterns lately. It's led to inaccuracies in the numbers, in forecasting.
And that affects public trust, presumably.
Exactly. It undermines confidence in the ability to manage the system effectively.
So, putting all that together, the sheer numbers, public service impact, economic questions, labor market distortion, data issues. What are the concrete next steps? The key visa controls being proposed in Chapter 1.
Okay, they outline a series of plan changes.
Yeah.
Big ones. Increasing the skilled worker threshold back up to graduate level, RQF6.
So it was lowered previously.
Yes, it was RQF3, A-level equivalent, now back to degree level. Also, narrowing the temporary shortage list significantly. Closing the social care visa route for new overseas recruitment entirely.
Wow, that's huge for that sector.
It is. Restricting dependents for lower-skilled workers who do come on that temporary shortage list, increasing salary thresholds for bringing dependents generally,
Right.
and raising English language requirements, too, for applicants and dependents.
So quite a tightening across the board.
Definitely. The aim is fewer people overall and a different profile of who comes.
Okay, that sets the scene perfectly for Chapter 2, which looks specifically at migration, the labor market, and economic growth.
Right. The argument here is about alignment. Aligning immigration much more closely with UK labor market needs while really boosting domestic skills development.
What's the core problem they identify?
The central argument is that if it's not managed well, high migration can, distort things, potentially depress wages in some areas, maybe lower productivity if skills don't quite match, and obviously strain public services.
And they see a link to domestic training falling.
Yes, they highlight what they see as a concerning trend. Record high net migration happening alongside a decline in investment in domestic training. It suggests maybe the system relied too much on overseas recruitment.
Instead of building up the homegrown workforce.
Exactly. Developing skills of UK-born people and those already here legally.
So to try and fix this, they're proposing this new body, the Labor Market Evidence Group, or LME Group. Who's in it? What's its job?
This sounds like a key mechanism. It'll bring together people from the Industrial Strategy Advisory Council, GWP, Skills England, and the equivalents in the devolved nations, and the Migration Advisory Committee, the MAC.
So all the key players.
Pretty much. Its role is to gather and rigorously analyze data, hard evidence on the labor market, training levels, domestic participation rates.
And that evidence informs policy.
That's the idea, to make future immigration decisions more evidence-based, more responsive to actual needs.
And alongside this group, specific industries need to develop workforce strategies. What are those about?
Yes, key sectors that rely heavily on overseas workers will need to create or update these strategies.
Focusing on
how they'll boost skills and training for UK residents, how they'll improve working conditions to attract and keep local talent.
Right. Make the jobs more attractive domestically.
Precisely. And also, crucially, how they'll engage people who are currently economically inactive, get them back into the workforce. It's presented as a partnership between government and industry.
Okay, let's get into the specific visa changes in this chapter. Skilled worker visa, first raising the threshold. What does that mean practically?
As we mentioned, it's going back up to RQF level 6, degree level. That reverses the previous RQF3 A-level standard.
And the immigration salary list.
That's being abolished entirely. That list used to identify shortage occupations, sometimes with slightly lower salary requirements.
Gone. So what about people already here on the lower RQF3 level visas?
Good question. The paper says existing holders below RQF6 can still renew or change jobs within the UK. But any new applicants from overseas must meet that higher degree level bar.
Okay. But what about jobs facing shortages that don't need a degree? You mentioned a temporary shortage list. How does that work?
Right. So for jobs between RQF3 and 5 think skills above A level but below degree, there's this new, much more tightly controlled list.
Tightly controlled how?
Well, to get an occupation on the list, there needs to be clear evidence of shortage, backed by MS advice. And importantly, the sector needs a credible workforce strategy in place.
Linking back to those strategies.
Exactly. Showing a plan to fix the shortage long-term domestically. And employers using this route might face stricter conditions too.
Like what?
Possibly limits on the number of visas and maybe restrictions on workers bringing dependents. It's designed to be genuinely temporary.
Now, a sector we know has relied heavily on overseas recruitment is adult social care. What's happening there?
This is a really significant shift proposed here, citing concerns about potential worker exploitation.
Which we've heard a lot about.
Indeed. The government intends to close the main visa route for new overseas recruitment in adult social care.
Close it completely.
For new recruits, yes. There'll be a transition period until 2028 for those already here and working legally. They can generally extend visas, switch employers within the sector during that time.
But the long-term goal is?
Long-term aim is for the sector to move away from reliance on overseas recruitment, which realistically means a huge focus needed on improving pay, conditions, training to attract more domestic workers.
That's a massive change for care providers and the people needing care. On the flip side, though, the UK still wants top talent, right? What's being done to attract the best and brightest?
Absolutely. While tightening elsewhere, the paper stresses attracting highly skilled people. So proposals include increasing numbers on high talent routes, faster visa paths for strategic industries.
Like AI.
AI is specifically mentioned, yes. More research intern places, especially in AI. Simplifying the process for top science and design talent. Reviewing the innovator founder visa for UK university entrepreneurs.
So supporting homegrown innovation, too.
Doubling the number of workers overseas businesses can bring when setting up here. And expanding the high-potential individual route that's for graduates from top global universities.
Lots of focus on the high end. And practically any changes to make the visa process itself smoother.
Yes, they acknowledge a smooth system is vital. Plans continue to streamline applications, roll out the visa system further for a better digital experience.
Digital is key.
And they're piloting contactless travel using e-gates and facial recognition at the border, trying to speed things up for legitimate travelers.
Okay, moving on to Chapter 3 then, focusing on skilled students. International students bring money in, but the paper raises concerns about misuse.
That's the balance they're trying to strike. They highlight several issues. One, more students are staying on after their studies.
Using the graduate route, presumably?
Partly, yes. Two, a big rise in sponsored study visas granted by lower-ranked institutions.
Lower-ranked. Interesting.
Three, concern that the student route is sometimes being misused as a backdoor for work or to claim asylum. They note a rise in asylum claims from those initially on student visas, often near the end of their course.
Right. And 4.
And finally, questions about whether all graduates staying on actually get graduate-level jobs.
The numbers involved must be significant. What scale are we talking about for student visas?
They are significant. Sponsored study visas peaked at 498,000 in the year ending June 2023.
Nearly 500,000.
Yes. Factors include post-COVID travel resuming, post-Brexit rule changes, and that graduate route we mentioned. It's mainly driven by master's students.
And their dependents, too.
Yes, a big rise in student dependents as well. And interestingly, the paper notes the biggest growth in visas has been for universities lower down the global rankings, not necessarily the top-tier ones.
So to tackle these concerns, what's proposed around responsible recruitment for universities and colleges?
They're planning to tighten the requirements for institutions sponsoring students, raising the pass mark for each metric in the basic compliance assessment, things like visa refusal rates, enrollment rates by 5 percentage points.
Making it tougher to stay compliant.
Seems so. They're also bringing in a red, amber, green banding system for sponsor performance. More visibility.
And consequences for poor performance.
Yes, new interventions for near-failing sponsors requiring action plans, maybe even limits on recruiting new international students.
What about recruitment agents?
Institutions using agents will have to ensure those agents sign up to a new agent quality framework, aiming for more ethical recruitment.
And local impact.
Institutions will also need to show they've considered local impacts, like on housing, local services, when deciding their international recruitment numbers.
Okay. What about the short-term study route, specifically for English language courses? Sounds like there are issues there, too.
Yes. The data raises red flags. The visa refusal rate for that route was around 48% in 2024.
Nearly half refuse. That's very high.
It is. The government assessment is that a chunk of applicants might not be genuine students, but using it as a way into the UK to then claim asylum.
So what's the plan?
A review of the accreditation bodies for these language schools to ensure their quality checks are robust enough, and considering stronger checks for applicants to weed out misuse.
And for graduates who do finish their studies and want to stay, what changes affect them?
The graduate route, introduced in 2021, has definitely seen more grads staying. The government acknowledges their contribution, but worries not all are in graduate-level jobs.
Whoa.
So the proposal is to cut the length of the graduate route down to 18 months.
Cut the duration. Okay.
And they're also exploring a possible levy on the income universities get from international students.
A levy. To raise funds.
The idea would be to reinvest that money back into the UK's higher education and skill system more broadly. Still exploring it, though.
And finally, for this chapter, that link between student visas and asylum claims. What's the analysis?
It's highlighted as a growing trend. Students now make up the largest group claiming asylum from within the UK, having entered on another visa type.
And the timing is key.
Yes, the concern is many claims are made very close to the student visa expiring. This suggests to the government that, for some, the route might be used primarily to get into the UK to seek protection, even if circumstances back home haven't changed since they arrived to study.
Right, trying to ensure the road is used genuinely for education.
That seems to be the driving factor behind some of these student visa reforms.
Okay, let's broaden out. Chapter 4 covers fair controls, looking beyond work and study to family migration, humanitarian response, protecting the vulnerable. The paper says the family migration system is too complex now. What's the goal of the reforms here?
The main aim seems to be simplification and clarity. Create a more streamlined, transparent framework with clearer rules, less reliance on complex legal arguments, especially around Article 8 of the Human Rights Act.
Less deciding things based on exceptional circumstances.
Exactly. Move towards a system based on clear rules set by Parliament, making it more predictable for everyone involved. So if you're affected by these rules, the goal is less ambiguity.
And what specific areas of family migration are targeted?
They're looking at developing a new kind of overarching family policy for all UK residents wanting to bring family. Clear requirements on the relationship itself, English language skills, financial support, not relying on taxpayers.
Standard stuff, but maybe clearer.
Clearer and more consistent, potentially. And upholding the Armed Forces Covenant is mentioned too. They're also exploring stricter suitability rules and potentially changing English language requirements for adult dependents coming with workers or students.
You mentioned Article 8, exceptional circumstances. How are they planning to handle those complex cases?
They acknowledge some cases will always have compelling circumstances, but the goal is more clarity and consistency in how Article 8, the right to private and family life, is applied in immigration decisions.
How?
By setting out a clear framework approved by Parliament that balances individual needs against the UK's wider economic and social interests.
And trying to limit claims seen as trying to bypass the rules.
That's a stated objective, yes.
Oh.
Limiting claims from those seen as trying to circumvent rules or just delay removal. They plan legislation to strengthen the public interest test in these cases and clarify how Article 8 should work in immigration.
Okay. Shifting gears slightly, what about the UK's humanitarian response? Safe and legal routes.
The paper reaffirms the commitment to providing safe routes, mentioning the schemes for Syria, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Hong Kong as examples.
But with conditions.
Yes, a strong emphasis on making sure these routes are sustainable long-term, well-managed to prevent abuse, and aligned with the UK's actual capacity to support people and help them integrate successfully.
Any changes to how these schemes operate?
They're reviewing refugee sponsorship schemes involving businesses, universities, community groups to create a clearer, more effective framework for that kind of partnership resettlement.
Now, the Windrush scandal looms large over any discussion of fairness in the system. How does the paper address that legacy?
It reiterates a strong commitment to righting those wrongs and embedding cultural change in the Home Office.
What specific actions?
They mentioned the re-established Windrush unit, reviewing the response to the Lessons Learned review, increasing advocacy support for claimants, the work of the Windrush Commissioner.
So ongoing efforts.
Yes, the focus is on ensuring lessons are truly learned and recommendations from the review and the EHRC action plan are fully embedded in how the Home Office operates day to day.
And finally, in this chapter, protecting vulnerable people from exploitation within the system. What's being done there?
This links back partly to the care sector concerns. They express significant worry about unethical recruitment.
And taking action.
They note an increase in sponsor licenses being revoked from employers found exploiting workers. They also acknowledge the unacceptable delays in the National Referral Mechanism, the NRM, for modern slavery victims, and pledge action.
What other measures?
Exploring further reforms to sponsorship to empower workers, make it easier to switch employers if exploited. Reconsidering the domestic worker visa route, a new criminal offense for child exploitation. Stronger protections for migrant victims of domestic abuse.
So quite a focus on the protection side, too.
Seems so. Trying to address vulnerabilities across the system.
Right. That brings us to Chapter 5, Rules Respected and Enforced. This sounds like a core part of the restoring control message. What's the main argument for boosting enforcement?
The fundamental argument is pretty straightforward. To restore order and integrity, you have to tackle abuse and misuse, and you have to increase returns of people with no right to be here.
It's about maintaining credibility.
In public trust, yes. While most people follow the rules, they argue stronger action is needed against those who deliberately break them to ensure the system is seen as fair and consistently applied.
So what specific measures are planned to beef up enforcement both at the border and inside the UK?
It's a multi-pronged approach. Tighter rules at the border to refuse entry more easily to those with a history of breaking rules.
Yeah.
Within the UK, more powers and resources for immigration enforcement teams, tracking down, arresting, removing people without permission to stay, simplifying deportation processes for foreign national offenders.
Foreign offenders is a recurring theme.
It is. Also, tighter controls on people arriving who seem to have a pre-existing intention to claim asylum, especially if conditions back home haven't changed.
Using technology more.
Definitely. Using a visa data for compliance, continuing the crackdown on illegal working, and building on banking measures to tackle tax evasion by visa holders.
Technology seems central to the border security aspect, too.
Very much so. Developing digital identity through visas, better intelligence analysis to spot risks, more targeted checks. The big goal is real-time knowledge of who's in the UK and their status.
Makes sense for enforcement.
And expanding e-gate use, piloting that contactless facial recognition travel, it's all part of enhancing security while trying to smooth the flow for legitimate travelers.
The paper also talks about tackling abuse, organized crime, and individuals bending the rules. What kind of abuse and what actions?
It covers the spectrum. Serious organized crime like smuggling and trafficking, but also individual deception to get around controls.
Like the asylum claims from people already here.
That's a key focus, yes. Especially when home country conditions seem unchanged. Actions include potentially reimposing visa requirements for countries where asylum claims spike after visa-free travel was granted.
Right.
Developing new policies for those in-country asylum claims where circumstances haven't demonstrably changed. Tighter visa controls on specific routes if abuse is found. More pressure on other governments to cooperate on returns.
Financial incentives for sponsors. Age assessment.
Also mentioned, yes. Financial measures to encourage responsible sponsorship and improving age assessment processes for asylum seekers.
And what about the actual enforcement teams on the ground? What support are they getting?
The focus is boosting their operational capability. Things like body-worn cameras for transparency, better data systems for intelligence, biometric kits for identification.
Tools for the job.
Yeah, essentially. Also, supporting the Fair Work Agency against worker exploitation, stronger penalties for employers using illegal labor, potentially extending banking rules to stop illegal working to more financial institutions.
And linking up with the tax authorities.
Yes, working more closely with HMRC on tax noncompliance by visa holders.
And finally, in this chapter, foreign national offenders again. What's the latest stance or action proposed?
The position is clear. Criminals should be removed where appropriate. They highlight increased returns already happening.
Specific changes.
Classifying convictions leading to the sex offenders register as serious crimes under the Refugee Convention, which impacts removal decisions. And broader reforms to act earlier against a wider range of crimes, even non-custodial ones, to prevent dangerous individuals staying.
Okay. Chapter 6 then shifts to fostering integration and cohesion. The paper says integration efforts need to be broader than just focusing on asylum seekers. Why?
The core argument is that successful integration benefits everyone. The individuals, the communities they join, the UK as a whole.
How so?
Better access to services, better education and health, finding work, contributing socially and economically. It builds cohesion. So the idea is integration should be a focus across the entire immigration system for everyone coming legally.
Not just refugees.
Exactly. A broader approach to improve experiences for all newcomers and boost community relations.
English language is always central to integration debates. What changes are proposed here?
They really hammer the link between English skills and good outcomes like employment. So the plan is new or tougher English requirements across more routes.
For applicants and dependents.
Both. Raising the required level for skilled workers and for settlement. A new requirement for adult dependents of worker students to have A1 basic user English on arrival.
A1 on arrival, that's new.
Yes, with plans to increase that over time. Requiring progression to A2 for extensions and B2 for settlement. And raising the existing settlement requirement also to B2.
So a general raising of the bar for English.
Seems so, though they do also acknowledge the need to improve access to English classes alongside these requirements.
The paper talks about earned settlement and earned citizenship. What's the philosophy behind changing these pathways?
The idea is that permanent settlement and citizenship are privileges that should be earned through commitment and contribution to the UK.
Not just based on time spent here.
They feel the current system, mainly length of stay plus the life in the UK test, doesn't fully reflect economic and social contribution. So they want to extend the points-based system principles to settlement.
Oh.
By increasing the standard qualifying period for settlement to 10 years, continuous lawful residence.
10 years is standard. That's a big jump from 5 for many routes now.
It is. But they do suggest opportunities to potentially reduce that period based on demonstrating significant positive contributions. Details aren't fully spelled out yet, though.
And earned citizenship?
Similar principle. Rewarding those who respect rules and contribute. They explicitly say citizenship won't be offered to those who've bent the rules or haven't shown commitment and contribution.
Makes sense within their framework. Okay, bringing it all together in the conclusion, Chapter 7, what's the final takeaway message?
It really just reaffirms the main goal. Restore control, bring down net migration. It recaps the package of reforms work, study, enforcement, integration.
Highlighting the core principles again.
Yes, linking immigration to skills, enforcing rules, supporting integration. It also acknowledges some measures will take time, might need new laws or different approaches across sectors.
But the final word is?
The final statement is basically that the government believes this white paper delivers the action needed to meet its immigration pledges.
So, wrapping this up for you, the listener. This white paper signals a really comprehensive overhaul of the UK immigration system.
Big changes proposed.
The clear aims are cutting net migration significantly, shifting the focus heavily towards specific skills while boosting domestic training, getting much tougher on rule breaking, and trying to ensure better integration for those who do come legally.
Absolutely. And some specific points really jump out, don't they? That quadrupling of net migration setting the context is just huge.
Definitely.
The planned closure of the social care visa route for new recruits, that's a potential earthquake for the sector.
Huge implications.
And extending the standard settlement period to 10 years, that will change calculations from many people planning their lives here.
It really gives you a lot to think about, doesn't it? What will the real-world impacts be on the economy, on society? How will businesses and individuals actually adapt to all this?
Those are the million-dollar questions, aren't they? There will be a lot of debate and analysis of these plans in the coming months and years.
For sure. And if you want the absolute full detail, the nitty-gritty behind everything we've discussed,
then we definitely recommend looking up the white paper itself. Restoring control over the immigration system.
Oh.
All the context is in there.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive today. We hope it's given you a much clearer picture of the government's detailed plans for the UK's immigration system and the thinking driving them.